You're listening to A Seat at the Tech Table, a podcast by Sisters in Tech, hosted by Anna and Esther Kofariji. This podcast highlights the experiences of Black women working and thriving in the tech industry. You'll learn about how they found their paths into tech, and hopefully you'll be inspired to consider whether there's a seat for you at the tech table.
Today's guest is Shayanna Sims, a New York-based UX program manager.
Hey Shayanna!
Hi.
Welcome. We're so glad to have you on the episode today.
Thank you for joining us at A Seat at the Tech Table.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm super excited to be here.
Okay, let's get into it. So tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you're from, and what you do.
Cool. So I'm Shayanna. As mentioned, I am currently a New York City based in Brooklyn UX program manager, and I lead recruiting operations. I lead research operations for YouTube Shorts. I'm originally from upstate New York, small town called Rochester. It's actually very different from New York City, closer maybe to like Midwest culture. I've been at Google, YouTube for the past 5.5 years. And I recently moved back to New York during the COVID pandemic. I was in the Bay Area since 2016. I graduated in 2014 with a degree in information systems from Syracuse University. And then I went on to work on Wall Street as a business systems analyst before moving over to Google. And then moving into UX. Outside of work, I have so many different hobbies and I love them all. I love to dance. I like to cook. I like to be like in creative spaces, hanging out with friends and family. I like photography. I love coffee. I just like to have a good time. You know, when I'm at work, I'm really focused on work and dedicated. And in my time outside of work, I really try to make sure I have a lot of fruitful experiences, to just be more well-rounded.
Absolutely, you do sound very well-rounded. Before we kind of get into it, I'm quite intrigued to understand or know what is your favorite cuisine to cook?
This is so basic, but I got to go with one thing about me, I'm going to sell what I'm good at. And I really love salmon. And I can cook it any kind of way, and I will cook it any kind of way. And if I could, I would eat it every single day.
Wow.
I have to go with salmon. I saw this tweet actually, and it was this is not actually that funny, but I'm gonna say it anyway. But it was people think that bears are the biggest threat to salmon, and it's actually me. And it resonated with me because of the salmon that I eat and cook. And yeah, I love salmon.
I love it. Oh my God. Okay. Good to know. Okay, so you've kind of already taken us on a bit of a overview of your journey, but before we get into that, I just want to know a little bit more about you. So you're currently based in New York. Is that where did you grow up? Just tell us a little bit about growing up.
Yeah, so kind of touched on this a little bit, but I'm from upstate in Rochester. I grew up there, spent literally all of my life. Actually, I spent all of my life in New York State until I got the offer from Google to move to California. I've only ever lived in New York and or California. Okay. And so that was an interesting transition within itself. But I grew up in Rochester. I went to public school before, going 70 miles down the road to Syracuse for college. And then, after college, I moved down to New York City. So literally, I was just spending my time going, more and more south in New York State until I couldn't go any further south. And then I went west. I grew up in Rochester, went to school in Syracuse, and then I moved down to the city for my first 2 years of adulthood, which was really cool. I was living in Harlem at that time. And like I said, working on Wall Street. And then, once I had some clarity around a little bit more about what I was good at and what I wanted to do, I decided, I've always known that I wanted to work in tech, and we can talk about that too. Yeah. But I think I knew it became a little bit more clear after 2 years in my role, fresh out of school, that while I love New York City, it is my favorite city. I needed to go out west to really embed myself into tech. I wanted to experience Silicon Valley. And, while I wasn't, super thrilled about San Francisco or the Bay Area, I really did love New York. I didn't want to leave at the time. That move, and we'll talk about this too, really was like the most probably life-changing thing for me. And I'm so glad that I did it. Despite, the ups and downs of my experience moving across the country, it really changed the trajectory of my life.
Okay, I'm super excited to get into this because, you sound like you've had a bit of a journey and a fruitful experience, but let's hear about it.
So let's go a bit back and talk about your university experience. So you studied management information systems. It sounds interesting, but I don't know what it is. So tell us a bit about your course of study and like what you enjoyed about it.
Totally. So before getting into that, I also want to provide a little bit of additional context into like how and why I chose that major. So essentially, when I was in high school, I've always actually loved math and science. Growing up, I'm like a baby millennial. We're at the tail end of being a millennial. So I love that I got to experience the world while growing up, both like analog and digital. And the rise of like the internet happened as I was also growing up. And so, my mom, she went to college late, but she also studied information systems. And so I was exposed to computers and this idea of technology or, physical hardware at a young age, going to like camps. She worked at Xerox. And so she was also in sort of tech. Tech at that time. And so I had early exposure to that. And I thought I wanted to be an engineer just based on like, what I was good at, maybe suggestions from my like teachers. I had really great relationships with like my calc teacher and my science teachers. And so we were all pushing for that. But something about me, I've always excelled like academically. However, I've never been a good standardized test taker. Tests in school, like I'm fine. I typically was getting good grades. But when it came time to take the SAT, like I took the prep courses, I studied, I took it multiple times, and I just could not. I got into every college that I wanted to get into. So it wasn't that, but I couldn't get the score that I needed to get into the engineering school at Syracuse. And so they put me in the tech adjacent program, which was management information systems. We call it the iSchool. When I got there, though, my plan was like, okay, I'll just like, test my way back into engineering. But I'm glad it worked out the way that it did. To like provide some clarity here, the iSchool, it had a more general curriculum. It wasn't necessarily focused on like building things like as what an engineer would be doing, building software or hardware or just building. But it was more so like what do we do with information and data, right? So we took courses on like database management, network security. We did have electives where we could like code. So I did come out learning SQL. I knew Java. I had dabbled in JavaScript. I took some HTML like classes, but it wasn't the focus. It was just a more general, broad curriculum around how to like set up systems and how to, manage data. What do we do with all this information that we can collect from some of the things that we build, through software or hardware. And so when I left that program, I think because it was so general, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, what I was good at, what avenue to focus on. I didn't necessarily know, I didn't have the exposure that I have now to all of the cool roles that exist within tech. I mean, I went to school a little naive and, I'm the third person in my family to go to college. So I didn't have a lot of like, family advice to pull from. And I was learning a lot, on the fly. And so with that, I think I just chose, the path that seemed to be prestigious, which was like, just get a job, right? You've excelled through college, you're on the dean's list. The next logical step, you have an offer from JP Morgan, take it, even if you don't necessarily know that's what you want to do, or you don't even know what you want to do. I didn't know what I was good at. I was 21, graduated, and kind of just like, all right, I'm going to take this job and, learn as I go. And that's, kind of like how I got into the iSchool and, how I ended up like on Wall Street immediately after.
Wow. Okay, so tell us a bit about kind of JP Morgan. Like, how did you even get into that?
Yeah, so it's all connected. At the time, they don't have this anymore, unfortunately, or fortunately, but at the time, JP Morgan had a partnership with Syracuse where they had a campus, or they had a presence on our campus. And so I applied for an internship my sophomore year, and I got selected as a business systems analyst. And I worked on campus, sophomore year, summer, and then the next summer, junior year, I was able to be in New York City, like in our Park Avenue office. And then senior year, I applied for the full-time position. It was an analyst program, which was also that program itself. While we'll talk a little bit more about my overall experience at JP Morgan, that program itself was also another life-changing experience. It was called at the time, I think, the Technology Analyst Development Program. And all the new analysts from all over the US were based in New York and New Jersey for a summer, a 6-week training program. And it was just really, really cool to be getting that access to training, meeting all my other, my cohort. Those are still some of my really good friends right now. And one of the biggest things, when you think about the longevity of a career is your network and your peers. And it was really it built the foundation of my current network. And so while maybe JP Morgan itself didn't work out longer term for me, that experience, I'm very grateful for. So like I said, I took that, they had a presence on our campus. I had been interning with them. That was the only company actually I've ever worked for, as a corporation, JP Morgan and now Google. I don't have too much experience in terms of what it's like outside of those two companies. And then I took that full-time role. Once training was over and I was, embedded into my team, I was placed on the JP Morgan Securities team, which is really cool in theory. Our team, we worked with high net worth and ultra high net worth clients. And I was on the tech side. So I worked with the developers who were building the infrastructure for them to have an online presence, to be able to, make deposits on their app, those types of things. And at the time, it was a really interesting time because the SEC was, they had created more regulations around stricter rules around getting to know your clients while you're onboarding. And so my job at the time, I was part of the team that was building out the new designs for those user interfaces for that app. And so in theory, it sounded cool, but what that ended up translating to, the role itself was as a business systems analyst. That's general, same as a program manager now. But in hindsight, I believe it's something similar, a hybrid between a program manager and a product manager, where a lot of my day-to-day was building out functional specification documentations, getting business requirements from the business stakeholders, the people who are actually working with the clientele, translating those needs into functional specifications, and then being that liaison essentially between the business and the development team. But ultimately what I found, two things, was that I didn't feel supported. I didn't feel like I could have a long-term career there. I didn't know what I was doing. Most of the time there was a higher BSA above me who was doing most of the work. And so I didn't really feel like I had any growth opportunities, mentorship. I didn't see a lot of other Black people, let alone Black women, on the tech side. Obviously, they have a lot of, Black people in banking. I think it was just a very isolating experience, in tech. And I just didn't see a future there for me. But I'm grateful for that job because the nature of what I was doing, within that, I noticed so many things were wrong, right? I was realizing that as we were developing these new user interfaces, it took so long. We were using waterfall methodology for software development. And by the time we delivered, the needs had changed. And so that kind of is how I got exposed to what the concept of user experience was. And that led me, it was a pivotal moment for me of this is actually a really cool thing that I would like to learn more about. And that led me on the path that I'm on, today, to seeking that transition from what I was doing then into UX.
Yeah. You say that you kind of began to notice things in your role at JP Morgan. You didn't feel supported. You didn't kind of see that you had growth. You didn't feel that you had growth opportunities. Are these things you recognized early on, or was it kind of gradual? How did they kind of appear to you?
I think I knew deep down, I always knew. And I think, when I look back at it, I think it was because I had never approached my career in a way where I thought I had choice. I really, at that time, I think I was just in the mindset of do what's expected of me. And we don't get to choose our careers, right? We do. I went to college because they told me to. I got a good job because they told me to, and that's good enough. And I think, as I was growing, just as a woman, I just was thinking no, I should be happy. I deserve to be happy in my role. I think it set me off on a self-discovery journey of what do I like? What am I good at? What would I like to spend my time on, for 40 plus hours a week? I knew it, like I said, when I took that full-time role, because I didn't choose it. I didn't apply to other roles. I knew I was just I'm going to get this offer. So I'm going to take that instead of really digging deep and putting myself out there for other companies for roles that I may not have had experience. I just had a different mindset and a little bit more of a limited sense of what was possible for me. And that's why I took that role. But, things became clear to me immediately after the training program when I got on my team. There was no real onboarding to the team. I was kind of placed with a manager who had not managed before. I spent a lot of time alone, reading documents or trying to teach myself. And I just, at first I'm well, maybe this is easy. Maybe I'm just they're paying me a lot of money to just sit here and watch Scandal. And so I'm this can't be, how am I, if I'm thinking I'm using this as an opportunity to get to where I really want to be, I need to come out of this with a skill set. And it was in that moment that I was just kind of while it's great to be chilling, at work as a 21-year-old, I'm killing it, from the outside looking in, but I was severely unhappy. And, no amount of money was gonna, fill that void. And I felt I'm 21, I can take a risk in terms of or going somewhere else and maybe it not working out. I'm still young enough where I can pivot. And I knew then that it was time for something new.
Cool. No, I think that's so key. So what was the transition like? Moving from tell us the story.
It was awful. Oh my God.
Why?
I think the transition, it was just a long, hard transition. And I think a lot of what you'll come to see from my story is I just really did a lot of learning on the way. And that made things a lot more complex and complicated. And one thing about me, I'm determined. When I have a goal, I'm just going to do it no matter how hard it is. I may cry and be crumbling on the inside, but the next day I'm going to get over it and show up for myself. And so initially the transition was really hard when I really identified what it was that I wanted to go after. And to be clear, once I realized what UX was, I needed to figure out okay, if this is something that I want to do, then I need to build that skill set. And so what I did was I kept my job, but on the side, I started taking classes and I went to a General Assembly boot camp, a weekend workshop, not the boot camp. I was identifying whether or not I was going to do the boot camp, but I ended up not doing it. So I took the workshop and it was a 3-day workshop where they kind of just did an overview of what UX and product design was. I got to know the different functions within the org. Excuse me. So the difference between the UX design track and what research was, those types of things. And it was there that I decided that I thought research was just a better fit for me as a person, my interest. It was a perfect mix of psychology, getting to speak to people and uncover their needs, but then also having that influence over product strategy and direction, which was really what I wanted. So once I identified what I wanted, then it was just kind of all right, these are the skills that I need. I went through and kind of looked at job descriptions. These are the skills that I need. I'm either going to go back to school or I'm going to be able to transition in industry. And I, tried both avenues. I signed up for GRE prep and I did end up taking my GRE because I was okay, maybe I can just go back to school and get my master's in HCI. I didn't end up doing that, clearly. But I, at the same time, I started having networking conversations with people at JP Morgan. I knew that I wanted to be more on a consumer-facing product that I used. So at Chase, that would have been the Chase banking app. So I reached out to literally everyone who worked in Chase banking UX. I found a director who was like really willing to mentor me. And I just kind of like wanted to learn from her. She did let me know though that like on their team, they really wanted, more senior people. They were really recruiting people from these HCI programs. And so that gave me faith that like, if I kept going, maybe I could have that opportunity, but I also didn't want to limit myself. And so I started applying elsewhere. I was applying for a year actually before something turned up. And I got rejected. Something I want to call out though is, I applied for and got interviews. Like I made it to the final round with Snapchat in that year. And I finally I got to the interview and completely bombed it. I was nervous and just completely bombed it. It worked out, but something that I want to call out is that I just faced a year literally of rejection after rejection after rejection. And it was really hard to continue going. But in the moment that I was like, all right, maybe I need to figure out a different path, Google reached out to me.
Oh, wow.
Google has always been a dream company. When I think of we have our shortcomings, but when I think of me as a person, the products that I use, when I moved to New York, relying on maps, or when I look at my phone, thinking of all the things that I use for Google. And now even as an employee, without our services, my life would be different. I knew that I would need to answer. And they reached out to me with a role that was completely unrelated to anything that I ever wanted to do. It was a staffing services associate, which is in people operations, which is not in tech or UX. I mean, it's within tech, but it's not on the tech. It's a non-tech role within tech. But, I figured let me just get through the interviews and, if I get an offer, I can cross that bridge when we get to it. I ended up getting an offer, and for some reason, I just felt like it was worth taking. I knew that I wasn't really happy about the role or excited. And so, but I knew that if I could get my foot inside the company, that I would be able to move over and transition eventually. And I did. When I got the role, I immediately knew it was just not a fit for me long-term. I kind of got a little job fish, but maybe that's a story for a different time. I took the role. In short, I was supporting hiring for Bay Area-based SWE or software engineering candidates. I was under-leveled when I brought in. I'm going to be really transparent. I ended up taking a salary cut. A lot of the things that I would have wanted to avoid, I didn't. I made a lot of mistakes. Like I said, I took a salary cut. My total comp went up, but I did take a salary cut. I took a role that was unrelated to anything that I had ever wanted to do, which was a risk. I left my favorite city and my family and friends, moved across the country alone. It was a lot of change at one time, that a lot of risk and a lot of uncertainty. But something in me, I just felt like it was the right thing to do. And I wasn't sure. And I don't know if this is at the time, this was a lack mindset, but it felt like I needed to take this opportunity and figure it out on that end. So like I said, I was under-leveled when I came in. All of the UX roles started at the next level. So immediately I knew that I needed to spend time proving myself so I can get promoted and leave the org. While I was working, I also enrolled in classes at UC Berkeley Extension. So some days I lived in Oakland, I would commute down to Sunnyvale for work and then commute back up to San Francisco for class, go home, eat, chill, and then do it all over again. But I was taking classes in visual design and introductions to research methodologies, things that were really helping me build the skill set on the side so that I could join hackathons or do volunteer work and to practice. Essentially, that's what I needed. I needed real world experience to be able to speak to in these interviews. I got promoted after 2 years, November of 2018, and then I ended up actually having a death in the family, which took me out of work for a little bit. But as soon as I got back, I started applying. I got an offer in February of 2019 to move over to Google Play to run UX research operations there. And I joined that team in February of 2019. And then over the pandemic, I had the most wonderful manager. I was really happy in my role. I mean, I didn't feel like I was growing as much as I could, but I felt like I'd finally found my footing. I had a lot, of responsibility. I had just gotten promoted again. Things were going well. And then we had a reorg and I lost my manager. And at that point, I was just kind of it's a good time to I had just gotten promoted. It's a good time to reconsider what I'm doing, what direction am I moving in, am I growing? And I didn't feel like I was working to like my highest potential. And I had decided that like I wanted to work in entertainment tech. And so I reached out to someone that I knew. Well, I didn't know. I saw her speak at a conference on YouTube, and I let her know that like I was interested in roles. They had a role on the shorts team that was like literally my dream. I wanted to work on something that was new and in its infancy because I needed, I've only worked at very mature, large corporations, and I wanted to see what the other side of that coin was like for growth opportunities, but also just for perspective. It worked out, and I got the offer in September, and I moved over in November.
That's so good. So good. Okay. So you are now a UX program manager at YouTube, on YouTube Shorts, as you just mentioned. Okay, so you kind of run us through kind of how you transitioned to the position of a program manager, but just kind of give us, especially the listeners, a bit more of an idea of exactly what your role entails. So like, what exactly are you doing on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, so I got to start by just saying that like the term program manager is literally like an umbrella term, and in the role can look different on different teams. My role at YouTube right now, it's the same title, same role, but it looks completely different from the work that I was doing at Play. So, I can touch on that and give a bit of an idea, but I do want to like call that out because program managers do different things on different teams. Program managers are all encompassing. UX program managers at Google, and I think actually externally too, we are essentially there to provide process and operational rigor to the design organization. So within UX, you have your UX designers, which can, be like interaction designers, visual designers, product designers. You'll have like design leads who report maybe into like, at Google, they'll likely report into like a VP of like UX, who works like, coincides with like VP of product and also engineering. And then within design, we also have research, which is a very important, component of a design org also. As a program manager, our job is to implement, like understand how the design org runs and to implement processes that makes the org more efficient. So for example, there are UX program managers who focus on design operations. And those are things, in my experience, what I see, those can be things that, you work with the leads to establish a process for requesting budget and tracking budget. You partner with your product and end stakeholders to, create a system to do like quarterly planning, right? Like you understand resourcing, like there are X amount of designers and these are the short list of things that product, our OKRs, objectives and key results. These are the things that we're setting to accomplish in this quarter. We have X amount of resources, right? So like, how can we get these things done? Or what needs to go below the cut line? How do we prioritize these things? When you think of like product design for a company like YouTube, it's something that most people use, right? So like any little update to the YouTube app, that has to go through several layers of approval, right? Like you need a design launch review process where like, the designers may design it and, this is something that product was working on, a new feature or something, an update, but it has to go up to the top to be like approved. And, that means that we have to play, calendar stalking with like, how do we get the right people in the room? So, you need a process for that. And so that is more so like on the design ops side. Research ops is something that I'm a little bit more familiar with. And for research operations, that looks like same thing, budget, right? Like with research at Play, at least, I'm still new in YouTube and I can talk about what I do, but like at Play, that looked like managing the research budget. And so implementing a process for like when researchers want to outsource or work with a vendor to scale our research, I would be the one, managing that relationship, handling the invoices, getting the request for proposal. I would be, when research was in person, the one making sure we had the right like environments, the labs, the equipment to do our actual research. When you think of a program manager, though, we want to think of like things that can scale. So, you don't want to be a single point of failure. So it's really just implementing processes. For research, it's important to like have peer review. And so like one of the things that I did at Play was implement a research review process where all reports and plans were submitted through one process so that like our research manager can review everything, working with like the research manager to build out like a roadmap, right? Like here are the eng OKRs, here's what product wants to do, and here are like the things that here are the questions that our research org are going to answer for you this year, or here's what we're seeing from a foundational standpoint, and here's where we suggest that we should invest. So the role is very flexible and adjustable, but when you think of a program manager, you want to think of like someone who is working very closely with designer research leads to build like efficient processes to make the org run and be a little less chaotic. There are also program managers on YouTube. We have like a UX culture program manager, and they're focused more on like team culture, or like, you know, what do people think of when they think of our YouTube UX org? How can we be better? What programs can we have? Like, do we have opportunities for our researchers to go and present and share, like, you know, outside of Google, like what they're doing and, you know, how they're moving the needle? So it really can be like so many things. At YouTube right now, though, within Shorts, I lead a team, something that's really big right now. I lead a team of participant recruiters, and we are working on a program to basically build a healthy pipeline of creators and viewers to tap into for our research studies. So, you know, Shorts is a new product, right? And so that means that when people think of short form content creation, they're probably thinking of TikTok, and then next they would be thinking of Instagram Reels. And so it's really like, where do we find these influencers or content creators in the wild? And how can we tap into the viewers who are consuming this content so that we can really build an experience on YouTube that makes these creators want to stay on YouTube and create short form content on our platform, which, you know, it's new, but eventually I do believe that, you know, Shorts will be, you know, a premier platform for short form content creation.
I love it. It sounds so exciting. Okay, this is good. So just something I want to touch on. You mentioned that you are more interested in, let's say, the research part of like your role. And because you're dealing with so many kind of like different leads or people within the org, are you able to kind of carve out the area that you're most interested in? So for instance, you are more interested in design or and the engineering part. Are you able to kind of focus your role to a specific specialism, such as like engineering or designers?
I think yes and no. So it depends, right? Like when I was at Play, originally, I don't know if I said this, but the reason why I moved into UX program management was because I was interested in research and UX, but I didn't have like the foundational research or like the traditional research background. And at Google, like research is like a big deal. You know, some of these people have like PhDs or, you know, really high educational backgrounds. And I, you know, came in with a bachelor's that was completely unrelated and then no industry experience. So I felt like my role, but I did have that operational experience. So I felt like my role was a good pairing of like my skill set and my interest. And that's why I took the role. To answer your question, though, it depends. It's product area by product area. And I would even go like further to say it's based on your manager and also the business need. On Play, you know, when I first got in, there were so many problems to solve. I was the first research program manager. And so I had a lot of work to do and I had to like prove myself. I had to like build out a program of research operations for the org. And I did. Once I found my footing, and I let my manager, a big part of like getting to your goal is letting the people who are either managing you or sponsoring you or who have power, letting them know what you want to do. And I did let my manager know. She knew from the beginning what my end goal was, which was, this may change, but at the time it was to get into research. And so there were opportunities where I could run studies. I got to go to Japan actually with one of my research leads to run like an ethnography study. And it was it probably has been the most rewarding like part of my career so far. I'll never forget that trip. It was incredible, actually. So yeah, you can, but on YouTube, like Shorts is it's like a startup, right? Like we wear many hats, but like not in that way right now. I think, once things calm down and we find our footing, then yeah, I can talk to my manager about like, hey, like actually I'm interested more on this side of the product. Can we carve out, like, are there any projects that, will give me either that exposure that I'm looking for, the connections to the stakeholders that I want to build partnerships with, and, or, the experience, so that like, if I do want to make that transition, I have something to speak to. Or even we have this concept of like a 20% project at Google, which is really like, it's not 80-20, it's 100% of your core role. And then 20% if you want to do something else, which is fine. But those are opportunities that come up once you're already like meeting or exceeding your expectations, your core role is taken care of. And you let your manager know. And then, yeah, I do think eventually once you find your footing, you're able to have those opportunities. I had them on Play because I had been there long enough to establish myself. I think, once things calm down on YouTube, I can get there too.
Okay, this sounds super interesting. Like, I'm getting a good idea of what you do in terms of your role, what you've done in the past. But I'm quite intrigued to kind of understand your experience of the workplace. Like, what is the workplace culture like, and how do you find it?
Yeah, so this one's tricky because so YouTube has been only like virtual for me in terms of culture. Google in general, like I loved the workplace culture, to be completely honest. I think, I had only, like I said, I had only worked for JP Morgan before Google, and it's literally night and day. I think when I thought of, JP Morgan and my experience there, I had to be like very like rigid and just like not who I am. We have to dress like, at one point it went business casual, but it was like, we were super dressy too, which was not my vibe. I felt like I had to be something that, I had a code switch. And I knew that I still, like, as a Black woman in a predominantly white space, like I knew there will always be some level of doing that. But, as I get older, like I really want to be in spaces where I can bring majority of myself. And I do feel like I got that at Google. And even more so, like as I get older and I'm just a little bit more confident, more comfortable in myself, I just lead with who I am now. And, I'm confident that it'll get me in the spaces that are meant for me. So in terms of culture at Google, I think it's really like, it's open. One of the things like I love is that like, you just really have the autonomy. It's up to you, right? Like it's a lot of type A people who are just like go-getters. There's a bias to action. If there's a problem, like you have the open opportunity to solve it or to bring it to someone's attention. One of the things that I loved when I first got there, when the company was smaller, I've been there, 5.5 years now. So this is not as feasible, but we met with Sundar, Larry, and Sergey every Thursday at this concept called TGIF, where like we had an open avenue to like ask questions. Literally, like now I think it's a little bit more controlled. A, where like we've doubled in size, but also B, it's easier to control now because it's virtual. So we have to ask the questions in advance and they can prepare. But before, like we had leadership in very compromising positions where like we would ask questions live in the room. Like I've never been somewhere where like you could ask your CEO and your founders questions and put the pressure on them about things that are important to you. So for me, that's always been a plus. Something that I love, that like I will cherish, I'm so grateful for, is our ERG. It's the Black Googler Network. No matter what city I'm in, like they've been indispensable for me. Like I've met so many cool like friends, mentors, like it's just, when you're on these teams and you're the only maybe, there's a chat or like, this is a joke, but like we got a well-being bonus. We found out about it on Wednesday, and like someone in the chat was like, wow, this is like the Sundar STEMI. Like, being somewhere where you can like joke around like that with your coworkers, like it really makes work a place that's like fun. Like, just something as being able to like choose, like wear whatever you want to wear, or like, I have my nose pierced. I wear like long nails. I'm able to just be who I am and exist as is. And I love that. And I can only work in companies now like that. I feel like Google has spoiled me. To take it back to YouTube, it's even better. Like YouTube has like the chillest culture. It's smaller, so much smaller and they've still like, been able to maintain their own culture separate from Google. Like, yes, we're the same company, but like working at YouTube feels like I moved over to a different company. I do have a different CEO. They operate differently. We have our own like Black at YouTube ERG. and I still get to like talk to like VGN also. So yeah, I have no complaints in terms of like culture, to be honest.
It just sounds like a sweet experience.
Nice.
I mean, we have our problems too.
Yeah.
We're in the news sometimes, but like I do feel like I feel, you know, grateful and privileged in a lot of ways to be able to exist in the spaces that I do.
I love that for you.
Love it, love it. Okay, there's a couple of things I want to pick up on. Some things you said a bit earlier on, but just want to kind of touch on them. So one of the things you said, there's so much. Where do I start? Okay, actually, let's go back right to the beginning. So you talked about kind of that year of rejection when you're applying for roles, and you talked about kind of being discouraged, and you were just about to like say, "Oh, kind of give up" when Google came. And I'd love for you to just share how you got through that. Like, obviously, kind of you were near the end, but like, what kind of kept you going? Because a year of rejection is ages, like 6 months. Some people would say, you know what, it's been enough. So yeah, what kept you going?
I think honestly, it was just like I knew that I could do it. I felt like I had to keep going and something would work out. And you know, while rejection is going to suck, like for me personally, I take everything personal. And I feel like, you know, it was every time that I got another rejection, it was really hard to keep going. But I also felt for some reason that like the more I did it, you know, it wasn't all for naught, right? Like I was getting rejected because I had never interviewed before. I got a job literally my sophomore year of college. I got an internship my sophomore year of college, and I stayed with that company, you know, through my full-time role. So I never had that experience of like going out, putting myself out there, putting a resume out and like needing to prove myself. Mm-hmm. I never had that experience because my interviews for JP Morgan, you know, the first one may have been a little difficult, but I felt like for my full-time role, I went to a meeting with like my boss and they asked me like 3 or 4 questions and then I got the offer. So I had never had that experience. So that year of rejection, I think it needed to happen, A, as like a reality check, but B, so that I could learn A, my value, B, my skill set, C, how to interview. Yeah. So like while I could tell in the moment, like this sucks, right? Like I'm tired of like, I'm just tired. I also was like, I could see the benefit, right? Like every interview I was getting better at telling my story. Mm-hmm. Every interview, like I could show up, you know, I had by the 6th interview, I knew like I could speak to my projects, you know, like from the back of my head. Like I didn't need to prep as much because I knew, you know, and I had been training myself. So I feel like while it sucked, I learned a lot over that year span too. And I also had a lot more clarity, right? Like, I mean, I think even though I ended up picking a role or my first offer was a role that I accepted that wasn't really in line with what I wanted, going through those other interviews also taught me that like, I didn't really want that either. I was just looking for an escape out of JP Morgan. And I'm glad that the other things didn't work out because I wasn't pursuing them for the right reasons also. I think I knew that I needed to leave and I wasn't really looking at these roles with the same level of like, you know, the same level of like consideration as I would now, right? I was like, oh, this is a BSA role at a cool company. Let me check this out. And knowing that like, it wasn't necessarily the company, I had to figure out like exactly what I wanted to do. So I think, you know, it sucked. It took a toll on my mental health, but I think, you know, that was also an eye-opening. I mean, I talked about how moving to California, like, was a life-changing moment for me. And I think I can connect the dots here. Like, I went through a severe depression when I moved and when I started my job, because like I had listed, like, you know, I had a little bit of like a job fishing feeling. I had, you know, my salary was less than what it was in New York. I didn't have any friends out there. I didn't have any family. It was my first time living outside of New York State. Like my first time being this far from anyone. You know, I went to college an hour and a half away from home. And then I moved to a city that was a 45-minute flight from home. Like I've never been as far from my support system. And so, you know, the rejection, and then I finally got the offer and then I left. I think I needed to kind of go through that. It pushed me to seek therapy, which has like literally changed my life in so many other ways. I'm a big advocate for mental health and just like Black people to also go to therapy, even when nothing is wrong. But it's okay if something is wrong. And, you know, we spend so much time at work our jobs, our careers are a huge part of our identity and like who we are, our purpose on this earth, what we'll leave, our legacy. And so it's really important to really take the time to figure out what you want and then to not give up on yourself, like, you know, through the course of getting there. And I felt like my entire situation was just a testament to that, honestly.
Amen to that.
Yes.
Yeah. I think it's so key. One of the things you said was basically interviewing is a skill, and the more you do it, the better you get at it. So I think people should definitely take that away in terms of when you fail an interview, you don't fail an interview, you learn from it, and you can take that forward. And I think just generally speaking, and even with lots of other people we've spoken, I think one of the keys to success, be it tech career specifically or just in life generally, is failure tolerance. When you learn not to let failure wipe you out, that's kind of how you can kind of progress. And I think, especially in tech, because a lot of things fail, like your software, your code will fail, your project will fail, like there's failure at every turn, but you have to keep going. And it's that kind of constant forward momentum that creates great products and creates great careers at the end of the day.
1,000%. And I actually would go even further to say that, like, it's in my moments of failure that I learn the most. When things are going good and I'm coasting, like, yeah, that's cool. Like, I'm, you know, yay. But like when I fail and I can actually like look at it, you know, objectively, like, okay, what could I have done to be better? Or what did I learn from this experience? When you just said, like, when you apply it to like, you know, tech in general, like there are companies who missed the mark. You may drop a commercial that did not land, right? But you know to not ever do that again. Or you get a piece of feedback. I think through failure, you get feedback, right? And feedback, constant feedback is what everyone needs, I believe. You know, we have our own concept of like self-awareness of, you know, our blind spots or those types of things. But I think it's really special when, you know, someone else speaks to those things because it gives you like how other people are perceiving you. In other areas that you may not have considered. And I feel like, you know, failure sucks in the moment, but like literally on the other side of that, like is always success in some shape, or always growth if you do it the right way, if you have the right mindset. It's never, oh, I failed, I should stop. It's more like I failed, let me see what I could have done differently and let me like, you know, pivot essentially.
Super cool. Okay, we've spoken a lot about work, and I think at the beginning you did tell us some of the things you do to kind of relax, like stuff you do in spare time. But because tech is such an intense experience, and working in a tech company and a tech team is really intense, how do you kind of balance, like at the end of the day or over the weekends, like how do you make sure that it doesn't kind of weigh you down too much?
Yeah. So to be honest, on my new team, I'm struggling. I'm figuring that out now. I had a balance when I was on Play because, you know, by the time, like, I just had really good boundaries with work. Like when I would go into the office, I'm present, I'm working, I'm doing what I need to do. But when I close my laptop and head out, like I'm back to like my life, my real life. You know, I'm going to dance class every Tuesday and Wednesday, whether or not my work is finished or not. Like, this is what I'm going to do. And I communicated that, you know, with my manager, and, you know, we just had a better work-life balance. I had a better work-life balance on that team, but I was also co-located. Majority of my team right now is in the Bay Area, in the Bay Area at HQ. Okay. And so I'm in Brooklyn. I'm 3 hours ahead. The sun sets at 4:30-ish now. So like, that's fine that I'm still in the house working until 8. But like, you know, in the summertime when the sun is setting at 8, I'm going to be outside at happy hour. So I'm still trying to figure that out. But like what I'm learning, or my plan right now is, you know, I'm new. In my first 90 days, my plan is to soak up everything that I can, to really just jump in and kind of like put myself in predicaments to learn. That's what I'm doing. And I can commit to that right now, mostly because it's cold outside. I'm not trying to be outside anyway. No, but also because I care about my career. I don't mean it that way. No. And then, you know, when I can get to a place where I know what I'm doing and my stakeholders trust me, then I can set those boundaries where like, maybe I start work on East Coast hours and I'm out, you know, at 5 p.m., you know, or 6 p.m. and my team will be comfortable with that. And so I think the answer to it is boundaries. But I think, you know, there's a fine line when you're on a new team or you're not in the same time zone. And so I'm trying to find that balance now. When I was in the same time zone with my team, it was fine. And I think it would be fine if I were still in California. But I probably will end up back in California, but for the interim, like I am, you know, figuring it out. I'm all in right now though. And so in the spring, when daylight savings is up, things may change, but I'll cross that bridge when I get to it.
Yeah, that's so interesting because we've had kind of this conversation with a lot of people, and time zones. I'm definitely experiencing it at work, and it is changing the way we work and how we are figuring it how to balance it with our real lives. So that's
I think even working from home, like because of COVID, has slightly shifted kind of our work patterns. Whether it's like we wake up earlier or we work later, which probably isn't the best situation, but I think like we're able to slightly manage our time better, or we're more in control of our time.
Definitely. But I think too, working from home, one of the things that like I dislike about working from home is that lack of separation. I like that physical separation of like, I'm going into the office and I'm leaving work here. And when I literally walk out of that door, I'm not checking my work phone. I'm not doing any of that, right? Because that's my time. And you pay me for those like 80 hours or 40 hours that I spend, in the office. And I struggle with that. Because if I'm at home and I'm chilling, I may be on my laptop and I can still do work, right?
Yeah.
But if I were, at work and leaving, I wouldn't do that. So
it's hard.
You have to find a balance.
Okay. So at the beginning, like you've really taken us on a really interesting journey to kind of essentially entering the UX space. And that was a very intentional step and journey you're on. I'm really intrigued to kind of get a sense of like what's next for you and where you hope to be kind of like going forward.
This one's a tough one. So, one thing I've noticed about myself, this is just who I am as a person. Like I love to have a plan, and I try to I start with a plan and I work backwards from there on getting to where I need to go. But I think in some ways that has held me back because when things just don't sometimes go according to plan, and you have to be able to pivot and balance and be flexible there. So now I try to operate with like a loose plan. I think what's next for me, for example, if I could pinpoint or put together what I would see myself doing in 5 years, I think I still be in entertainment tech. I love that space. I just love all things entertainment, film, music, like art. I don't really see myself straying away from that, honestly, if I can help it. Here's where it gets tricky. I have so many interests. I don't know necessarily. I came into UX thinking like, oh, I'm going to transition into research. But once I got into like UX and I got to like meet with like product managers or I got to partner with marketing, I have realized that like there are other really cool parts of tech that like I just, from lack of exposure didn't know. And so I don't necessarily know. I think, I'm going to continue like on my path now of like staying in UX program management until I can find, something right for me. I've considered also business school, but I'm not 100% sure. The only thing I know definitively, well, nothing definitive, but the only thing I think I can, confirm is that I know that I'll be in entertainment tech. I think I'll be back on the West Coast. I want to live in LA at some point, and I think it makes sense based on where like my career trajectory. And hopefully I'll be continuously like growing, leading a team. I've been considering like, what that could look like at YouTube, at, other companies. So I don't really know. I'm open to, where life takes me. One thing that I've learned over my career is that, direction is more important than speed. In my 20s, I was very like, oh, I need to get here and I need to get here by 25 or by 27, I need to be doing this or making this amount of money. And, when I do hit those milestones, I realize that like the career is just long. We have a long time to get to where we want to be. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, we're going to be working for a while based on capitalism. So like, I want to make sure that I'm like, intentionally moving for things, I'm walking towards something. I'm not running from anything. And right now, like I'm happy where I am. And so in 5 years, I can say that I'll still be in entertainment tech, but I don't really know too much from there. I have interest, like I said, in marketing and product. in research, but I don't necessarily know like where I'll land. One thing that I've always, something that I've learned is to be open to opportunities. Mm-hmm. Sometimes managers see things, in us or see like where we shine in ways that we don't see or we didn't consider. And so I found a lot of opportunities from like, people like leaning and telling me about those strengths. And that has kind of like shifted what I do. I think in this new role, I get to partner with so many cool people and different creators that has like exposed me to different things. I've also started like putting myself out there more in my personal life. Like, I had started a blog when I first moved to California. And I've always wanted to start a YouTube channel, but I got in my head and I never did it. But I did that. I've started that now. I put myself out there a little bit more on TikTok too. And so like, I think that, now that I feel like I'm established in my career, I think, these next 5 years, I really want to like figure out in my personal life, like how I could also, craft my brand there. And I think that's where my focus will be, less than like, on work. My entire 20s, I focused on work. And I think I want to focus on like Shayanna outside of work now.
Sure, for sure. Okay, I really like the fact that you are identifying exactly what you like about like your role and your job. You've kind of mentioned quite a few times that you're really interested in entertainment tech. What is it about entertainment tech that draws you in?
Yeah, I like experiences that other people that maybe like I know and love can consume. When I think of like when I grew up, mom, dad, and my sisters, like we just were a family that consumed a lot. Music is really like my favorite medium, but I also like, film. And I just think about like how like specifically culturally as a Black person, like a lot of us grew up like separately. We don't even know each other. But like when we get on like some of these like entertainment platforms, like we've literally all like lived similar lives. And that's just like because of culture. And I feel like entertainment preserves culture in a way, or it is a showcase of culture in a way. And I like that. And I will always want to work on something that is consumer facing. Entertainment is that like millions of people will be influenced by. And I feel like that is really rewarding. And that's really what it boils down to. When I think of like where I feel, the world is going, or the parts of entertainment that I'm in right now, like the creator economy, I think of YouTube when I was in college, right? Like, I had a relaxer and I was growing my hair out and I was following all these natural, like, girls on YouTube, and, they've blown up now. Like this is a 7-figure, career. It's like, I feel like entertainment has been, in a lot of ways, life-changing for people. And I think that like, I don't know, it's an experience that like I want to contribute to. I feel impacted when I see a good film. I get an emotional response, right? Like a favorite movie, like I will cry, or like, like I hear a song, I'm like, now I gotta run that back because the lyrics, like, or even live music, like when I go to a concert, like it's just a moving experience when you get entertainment right. And I don't really see myself like straying outside of that anymore. Maybe something cool like social, but I still think of that as like entertainment. But essentially like that's really what drives it for me. I feel like an emotional connection to media. And I want to be a part of the teams that are kind of like dishing that out.
For sure. I love that.
That's super cool. And yeah, it's so nice that kind of, I guess your journey, your career journey and your journey into tech has enabled you to kind of identify these things and to kind of be so confident and focused in pursuing them. So it's such a great story, such a great journey. And we've come to the end of the episode, but not the end of your journey. We're super excited to see where you go next. But we're so grateful to you for joining us today. And so grateful to you for sharing with our listeners. And for our listeners' benefit, where can they find you online if they want to know a bit more, if they want to kind of follow you and all that kind of good stuff?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at shayanna.shamar. And then I also have Twitter, but like, I don't know. I more lurk. I lurk there a little bit more, but I'm also funny. So if you want to follow me there, also, I'm like @ it wasn't Shay. I don't have the same handle there. And I also will be like revamping my blog. Right now, I only have one article, and that really is my journey into UX, which is kind of what we talked about here today. But my blog is also www.shayannashamar.com. And I love, like, you know, if anyone hears this and, you know, wants to talk a little bit more, or, you know, you have questions or whatever the case may be, please do feel comfortable reaching out to me. I feel like, you know, I wish sometimes that I had someone to help me. And that helped. I feel good about helping other people get to where they want to be, just because I didn't necessarily have that all the time. And I personally think, and I share this with you all too, I'm always grateful for spaces that essentially give us an avenue for exposure, or like allow people to have a platform to share like their journeys, because I think, you know, so much of our lives are now on social media, and a lot of that is really only showing like the destination and not necessarily the journey. Everyone looks like they have their lives together, or everyone looks like they have their dream career. And now tech is like this hot thing where like it's like, oh, you work in tech, you have clout, and it's like it's not all like always great. And so I personally love being part of, you know, communities or spaces where we have like transparent conversations. I will always keep it real, the good and the bad. And I personally care about, you know, sharing my story so that other young Black women and even Black men, you know, feel inspired to not settle. You know, there are roles out there that are cool, that are meant for you. You just gotta put in the work to get there. But that's really like, you know, how I feel. So in short, if you want to connect with me, I'm open to it.
Thank you so much. Honestly, it's been a pleasure. Just to hear your journey, and we're extremely excited for what's ahead.
Yeah.
Totally. Thank y'all for inviting me. This was great. And I love the platform that you've created. I can't wait to like, you know, share this more broadly, and also keep checking in on like future episodes.
For sure. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate you so much.
Thanks for joining us today and listening to this episode of A Seat at the Tech Table. You can connect with us on our social media platforms. Just search @SistersInTech on Twitter and Instagram, and check out our website www.sistersin.tech to see what we've got going on. Don't forget to leave us a review on iTunes, and we'll bring you the next episode soon.